Welcome to the Roost News, the place for all things volunteer. I am Lillian Lee, the co-lead for the Roost News, and we have a very special topic today, livable communities. And we have three very special guests. Let me introduce them. Mike Watson, Director, AARP Livable Communities. Rebecca Delphia, Senior Advisor, AARP Livable Communities, and the, I say Atlanta, but Georgia volunteer, and she is Myrtle Habersham. Am I pronouncing that correct, Myrtle?
That is correct.
Thank you. Great, great, great. Well, thank you all so much for joining today on the Roost News. And the topic is going to be livable communities. However, before we start that conversation, I would love for each of you to share a little bit about yourselves. Now, I did give your title, so we don't have to go through that again, but what does your title mean? How long have you worked for AARP or volunteered for AARP? Why AARP? And we'll just say Mike, Rebecca, and Myrtle in that order.
That sounds great. Lillian, thanks so much for having us here. Really, really happy to be here to talk about a topic that's passionate for all of us. And I know a passion point for AARP's volunteers and staff across the country as well, which is you already set up, livable communities. So as you said, my name is Mike Watson. I'm the Director of Livable Communities at AARP. I've been here for, it'll be 13 years this year. And it's been a wonderful 13 years in this association, getting to work on topics like Social Security, retirement security, family caregiving, and the one that became my favorite to work on, livable communities. And it's been just wonderful to be able to be part of the growth that we've seen in livable communities in the association. So the team that I lead, I have the great pleasure, you're going to hear from Rebecca here in a moment to talk a little bit about some of our work, but the team that I lead is our Livable Communities team and our programs department. And what we do is we're designed to set up and support AARP state office staff and volunteers across the country who are working to make communities great places for all ages. So we deliver technical assistance programs, direct community grants, toolkits and resources to help communities take action. And we also manage a program that helps communities themselves take action, which is known as the AARP Network of Age Friendly States and Communities. So we provide that support to AARP state office staff, volunteers, and directly to communities.
Great. Okay, Rebecca.
Well, hey everyone, thanks for having us on, and it's great to be with all your viewers, other AARP staff and volunteers today. My name is Rebecca Delphia. I'm a senior advisor with our Livable Communities team, and essentially what that means is I'm part of this wonderful team that provides support to local leaders that are working to make their communities more livable. Specifically, I lead what we call our local change program. So this is a variety of resources that are available to community leaders, such as technical assistance and training. We also provide grants to community leaders through the AARP Community Challenge, which we're going to be talking about in a little bit, and ultimately want to equip community local leaders to take action on a variety of important issues that affect older adults and people of all ages. I've been with AARP now for about 11 years. I started with our Pennsylvania state office as an associate state director for community outreach. I worked on a variety of issues across Western Pennsylvania, and then I joined our Livable Communities team in programs, our national office, in about 2016. So I love working with AARP, in particular working with volunteers. It's a real passion of mine, and I think that we have an incredibly talented group of volunteers and staff around the country that are engaged in this work. I also love it because it's incredibly mission driven. We know that people want to make the places where they live places that are vibrant, places that have a variety of housing options, a variety of ways to get around, vibrant public spaces, parks that are intergenerational, that encourage gathering of different people. And that's what our work does. It's really all about making communities places where people want to live, places where people want to stay. And what we found is that when we make places that are better for older adults, we in turn make them better for everyone. So that's really the crux of what we do. It's why I love this work so much. And volunteers are absolutely an important part of that. They bring incredible knowledge of communities. They bring experience, relationships, insights into how communities could work better in ways that in turn really do benefit us all. So I'm so happy to be here for the conversation today. Thank you for having us.
Wonderful. And talking about volunteers, Myrtle.
Okay, well, hello, and thank you, Lillian. Let me add my special thanks for hosting this program. I'm Myrtle Habersham, and I serve as the state president for AARP Georgia, which means that if you think about the various programs that Mike and Rebecca just talked about, I work on all of them along with our great volunteers and staff. In Georgia, I serve as the partner to our state director, which means that I'm and the lead volunteer for our executive council, which means that I work with them in planning the programs to meet AARP's goals, missions, and objectives, and to make sure that we're meeting the needs of the 50 plus and family members. Also, I have an opportunity throughout the state to work with our awesome volunteers, many of which are involved in key stakeholder groups. So they're the ones that the boots on the ground is such that's constantly connecting us with various organizations that we collaborate with to ensure that we're delivering the programs. Also, they're the eyes and the ears of what's going on and what we're hearing from our residents and what their needs are and what other things that we need to do as it relates to AARP. And I am the person who's the main contact with the state director and the staff in making that happen, as well as our executive council. I've been a volunteer about 12 years now.
Wonderful.
And so again, that is awesome. I love it. Been involved in all aspects and delighted to be a part of the program again.
Well, thank you to each of you for joining today. So let's transition back to the topic, livable communities. When someone is interested and knows nothing about AARP Livable Communities, what would you share and what is the premise behind the livable communities?
So Lillian, I think I'll take that one first.
Okay.
I would say it in a few simple words and then kind of go from there. What I would say is that when AARP thinks about and talks about livable communities, what we mean is creating a place that no matter your age, you can thrive and live the life that you choose. But the way that we do that is by focusing on the needs of older adults in community design, community planning, and looking at policies through the lens of what are the unique needs of older adults. And the reason we do that, and the reason we think about that, not only because AARP cares about our members and people 50 plus, but also because when we look at the community amenities and community features, we know that when you look at it through that lens and look at it through the needs of people over the age of 50, you're going to create a place that's really great for anybody, no matter their age. You think about this in the example of sidewalks and crossings. When an older adult having that curb cut or having that space where it's a little bit of a ramp to get onto the crosswalk, that works great for an older adult. It also works great for a young parent who's pushing a stroller. It works great for somebody who has a mobility assisted device, no matter their age. Works great for a child when you're trying to walk them across that crosswalk and they are just not moving fast. So it really is, we kind of look at it through that lens, and that's how AARP thinks about it. And that's how we approach all of our work. And I know we'll talk a little bit about some of the specific things that we do to make that a reality, but that's truly what it means to us, is making a place that's great for anybody, no matter their age, by focusing on the needs of older adults.
Yes, yes. Livable communities is for all ages to thrive in place well. Yes, excellent. So as we think about livable communities, I know before we start the podcast recording, we were talking a little bit about challenge grants. And I live in North Carolina, and in North Carolina, we have 5 regions for AARP, and I'm in what's called the Triangle region. And for the past few years, as a member of the Executive Council, I've had the opportunity to review challenge grants for North Carolina. So how does that tie into the livable communities concept?
Sure, I'm happy to take that one. And thank you so much for being a part of our incredible program. We're so grateful to volunteers like yourself that are a part of this effort. So if any of our viewers haven't heard of the AARP Community Challenge before, I'm very happy to introduce you to this program. We're in the 8th year of what we consider our Quick Action Grant Program that provides resources direct to communities, to nonprofit organizations and local governments in order to take action and make tangible change, whether it's to their housing, to their public spaces, to their transportation, or to their digital connectivity. We've been awarding these grants since 2017. We've awarded over 1,300 of them to date. So we've got some really incredible scale through an investment of over $16 million. And so these grants are used in a variety of ways. I think they can most effectively be used in order to demonstrate some of the good benefits that just come from thinking differently about a public place or piloting a new approach around transportation. It's all about how can we provide, the ideas are there, how can we provide some resources in order to test out some of these ideas, make them a reality, and ultimately lead to more permanent sorts of change. And so they can often be used very effectively to change the conversation. To give an example, sometimes a community may choose to paint a temporary bike lane down Main Street in order to prove that it's not going to impede traffic or affect the businesses negatively. They may be looking at doing some park enhancements, installing benches or picnic tables or lighting or wayfinding signage in order to improve a public space. They can do a demonstration project. Mike just gave a great example around pedestrian safety. So maybe they want to test some infrastructure changes, do some traffic calming in order to make it safer for walkers or people getting around on foot. All of these things and a whole lot more are part of what we try to fund through this program, with, again, that idea that sometimes it just takes a little infusion of cash in order to test out an idea that a community can really run with. So again, we've achieved some wonderful scale. These grants are really meant for all different types of communities. About 4 in 10 in every year go to urban communities, but 4 in 10 grants also go to rural communities. We've had communities as small as a few hundred residents be awarded these grants, and they really are indeed meant for all. The focus on these really is tangible change. How can we use these resources in order to create change in communities that benefits older adults and benefits people of all ages? And so we do that with a lot of community engagement, a lot of volunteer engagement, and ultimately carry these out on a very quick action timeframe. Over the past 8 years, we've successfully funded a range of different projects, but to give you some examples, we've been able to install community gardens, put benches and picnic tables into place, bike racks, sculptures, murals, public art, all kinds of different crosswalk enhancement installations that make them safer, green spaces, parklets. These are the things that make a community really a place, again, where we all want to live, and that's what this program is all about. I'll also share that we have had a wonderful application period this year. We received thousands of applications to the program earlier this year, as you likely are well aware of. And I'll just encourage all the viewers to stay tuned. We'll have an announcement next month in late June for the awardees, and look forward to another really wonderful slate of projects, a lot of inspiration and a lot of really good work. So please do encourage everyone, stay tuned, and we'll look forward to sharing more about this year's grants coming up just in a few weeks.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, the competition is very strong. I do know that. And so the Community Challenge Grants, that is a part that comes under the AARP Livable Communities division, so that it is done 1 time per year, 2 times. How often do you give out the grants?
Yeah, that's a great question. We typically have an annual application period. So typically that opens early in the year, and there's about 8 weeks where communities can apply. They can put forth their best ideas, and we receive many of those, and encourage a lot of creativity, innovation. There's and then essentially they're awarded by the midpoint of the year, and then have essentially 6 months, 5 to 6 months, in order to carry out these projects. So it's truly a quick action time frame, and that's intentional. It's all about how can we jumpstart change. And oftentimes what we find is that even in these projects that are very compressed timeline-wise, they are able to achieve really permanent sorts of outcomes just by virtue of having jump-started the change, by starting the conversation, and by putting something into place.
Great. So Myrtle, as a volunteer, I know that volunteers are involved in the application process for the challenge grants. Is this really a work between the state offices and the volunteers, or is it state driven, or is it volunteer driven? Is it a collaboration?
It's a collaboration. Thanks to Mike and Rebecca. They are very timely in getting out the announcements, alerting the state office and volunteers that the challenge application process is about to start. And that's when we start as a state, start working through our various volunteers and the stakeholder organizations to say, look, we're telling them information about the grant process, the fact that the applications are about to be open, encouraging them to apply. And then the volunteers, as I mentioned earlier, many work directly with these other stakeholder groups like local government, like Meals on Wheels, like the housing departments. So they do their best in getting the word out. If there are questions that need to be answered or there's some more information that's needed, again, we coordinate through the state office to make sure they get that, and they know about other successes in the state where grants have been awarded to them. So they're very encouraged. They look for it every year, and we celebrate once the announcements are made. We invite our volunteers to come to the celebrations to celebrate the awardees and talk about the progress.
That's a good point. I know about challenge grants and receiving the grant monies, but a lot of times I don't hear about celebrations. And with AARP, we know that celebrating whatever the positives are is very important. So that's a good point, celebrating the success. As listeners, if there's a listener that wants their community to become an AARP livable community, what do you suggest? What is the time? Well, we know about the time frame per se, but what is a process that they need to start thinking about now, since the grants have already been submitted and will be announced in June for next year? Next year is always coming up. So what should they be looking at as they progress towards wanting to apply for a challenge grant for next year? What's the steps?
I think there's a few, I think there's a few questions, there's a few thoughts there. One, I think you started with the conversation around what to think about to become a livable community. And I think the challenge grants are a part of that. And I'll kind of explain it in this way.
Yes.
The path to become a community that's a great place for anybody, no matter their age, at what kind of we call a livable community, there's a lot of routes to get there. And no community is perfect. Every community has work to do, and there are some communities that are doing a lot of the hard work. What we would say is that the most important thing to become a place that is a livable community or an age-friendly community or is a great place to live is to center what you're doing around the needs of older adults. And the first thing to do really there is to listen, to reach out, engage the community, understand where they feel like they need more support, more investment, where things could be better coordinated. And the challenge grants are a part of that for AARP, but there are really a couple programs that AARP offers to help get you down that path. The first that I'll explain is the AARP Network of Age-Friendly States and Communities, which I talked a little bit about earlier, just the name, but didn't really go into the process. What it is today is it's a network of 850 communities, including Myrtle's on representing in Georgia. She's got a very large contingent there. Lillian, I know, also a very large contingent in my home state of North Carolina.
Yes.
But it is 850 communities across the country who have kind of raised their hand and said, we want to become a place that's livable for anybody and become an age-friendly community. But it goes beyond that. It's not just, hey, we're great. It truly is a process that takes about 5 years of listening to the needs and wants of older adults. Yep. So it starts with that listening process, though, because it's so important that when we're designing long-term plans and when we're doing things to benefit people, it's so important that we center on what they actually want and need. Because sometimes what local government or what nonprofits or what other people or even what AARP thinks might be the best thing for that community, when you actually ask people, it might not be. So it's really important to center on what people want. And then that kind of starts the process over the course of 5 years of then listening to those, creating a community-driven action plan that is then implemented over the course of 5 years. And it's important to know, Lily and Myrtle, you know this as well as many other volunteers who are listening, when communities are creating that action plan, it's not AARP's plan for the community. It is that community's plan. It is driven by that community. And AARP is there to be a supportive partner, facilitate aspects of it and help boost it along the way, but it is not AARP's plan. We play a role in facilitating that. So that is a really, I think, one really important way that communities can do that. And then the community challenge grants, which we've talked a little bit about, are a way to really do that tangible, visible demonstration of what it means to be a livable community for all ages, and also help jumpstart some of that progress. So I'd love to kick it over to Rebecca to talk a little bit more about that, and also answer some of your questions around timeline, et cetera. But wanted to make sure we kind of hit that off the
Well,
top
that's very
of what
important.
it
I'm glad
really
you
means to be a
mentioned
livable
that.
community.
Yes, because Age Friendly Network versus Livable Communities, and it seems that versus the Challenge Grant, part of the Livable Communities, it appears that the Challenge Grants support the Livable Communities concept. So yes. Okay, Rebecca. Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think the most important thing is that, as Mike said, there's on-roads and on-ramps for everyone. There's no one right way to do this work. So it's really about finding what moves you to action. Maybe you're passionate about safer streets in your communities. Well, we've got a great resource for that. That's called our AARP Walk Audit Toolkit. It's a wonderful way to take a look at where you live, get a sense of how the streets, the sidewalks, the intersection are working, and kind of find the language that can help you talk about what sort of changes you want to need to see with your neighbors in your community in order to make it easier to get around in different sorts of ways. That's just one example, but we've got a variety of different tools, publications, resources that are meant for anyone. They're really meant, you don't need to have a planning background. You don't need to have a certain level of experience. They're meant for anyone who just wants to make their community better, whether that's in terms of having more options for housing, whether it's looking at the local park and saying, why do the demographics here not reflect those in my community? How can we make this more accessible to different members of the community? Really, whatever it is. And so I would really encourage the viewers, the listeners, to look at those resources and, again, just begin to get informed. That's a great first place to start alongside listening. Find out what's out there, how we can help, and also find out what other communities are doing, because there's a whole lot of inspiration that can be gained from that. So we have a wonderful website, aarp.org/livable, which is a excellent go-to sort of home base if you're looking for just, again, those resources, those articles, those stories about how other community leaders have taken action. You can get all of our publications for free and print download there, which are a wonderful tool. You can sign up for our e-newsletter, which will just drop a little bit of inspiration in your inbox every Wednesday, and give you something that'll, again, those sort of bite-sized pieces to help you get going and understand what else is out there. If I could point to a couple other tools, a couple others that come to mind. One of them is from our friends in the Public Policy Institute. It's called the Livability Index. You can find that at livabilityindex.aarp.org. That's a wonderful conversation starter. It gives you literally a data-driven score of how livable a community is. It looks at 60 different indicators across a range of issues, from housing, transportation, the environment, and many others. And again, can be used to just start that conversation. What currently makes my community livable and what would make it more so? And then the last one I would share that, again, for any of the listeners or viewers who are wondering, well, this all sounds great, but what's actually happening now in my community? We have an incredible tool that was recently updated called our Livable Communities Map. And so you can find that at livablemap.aarp.org. And there you can literally enter your community and find out, is it enrolled in the AARP network of age-friendly states and communities? Has it received a community challenge grant? Or what other communities in my state have? What are other communities that are maybe like mine, have a similar population or working on similar issues, or what have you? And you can find, again, just a wealth of inspiration and examples there that are going to help as you consider what are some of the options for how you move forward. So I would encourage folks, again, know that you're not alone, that we've got a number of tools, resources to support your work, and are always interested in hearing from volunteers and staff about what else you're seeing and what else you need in order to move this important work forward.
Wow.
Lillian,
Yes, go ahead, Myrtle.
As Rebecca was talking about the various tools, I just want to tell you one of the most popular ones in Georgia is the Home Fit Toolkit.
Oh, yes.
I think that we saw an elevation of interest in this especially during COVID, and now continuing, because so many people were at home and looking at things that they needed to fix at home. This kit, in addition to give you an overall summary or ideas about what to do and how to modify your house.
Mhm.
You can also concentrate on if you want bathroom enhancements, if you want
Yes.
lighting enhancements. So again, I just want to put a plug in there. We have used this kit and done training on it throughout the state. Some of our regional areas, especially the rural areas where people
Mhm.
are staying in their older homes and either don't want to or can't afford to move, can use this kit, and it is so practical. So again, kudos to everybody who's been involved in upgrading and
Yes.
enhancing that.
I agree wholeheartedly. Yes, we've started doing the presentation on HomeFit in our state because you are so correct. That is a very good and powerful presentation to take to heart. As you get older, per se, or just as you age in place, whichever term you want to use, to our listeners, our volunteers and staff, we hope that you've been taking note of the valuable information that's being presented today. But let's go just a little bit deeper. I always like to end on a couple of things. One about we talked about resources, and that's great. Thank you, Rebecca and Mike, for that. But what about the results? Have you seen over a period of time that this program has worked well? You looked at improvements or things that you might want to expand upon or might want to not even do anymore with the program. Talk a little bit about results.
I love that. I see Rebecca and I both kind of jumping to get to that one. So I'll just
Good.
be very quick and set up Rebecca to talk a little bit more in depth on it. I think results is at kind of at the center. Wanting to achieve results is at the center of everything that we design and deliver for livable communities. And I'll start with this. That is kind of our kind of one of the things that really drives us is we believe that AARP has an important role in communities. We know we cannot support every single community in the country. There are 3,000 counties in the United States, about 70,000 units of local government in this country, depending on how you count it. That's a lot of communities. And as big as we are, as great as we are, we can't be everywhere, especially in the same way. So one of the really important things that we try to do is build things that are able to be used by anybody who wants to become more livable and wants to pick up that kind of banner and move forward with it, but also build things that are for state office staff, for communities where we're going to have a much more focused presence to help them jumpstart their work. And there's several ways that we track results, but at the end of the day, we care a lot about not just the number of grants we deliver or number of advocacy wins that AARP state offices have at the state and local level, but what do those lead to? And one example here, right, we kind of, AARP state offices have been really advancing work on state and local advocacy on livable communities in the last few years, particularly at the local level. And it's great, again, to count the number of bills, but if a bill on ADUs, accessory dwelling units, which is kind of a smaller form of house that can be on the property, enabling people to have a family caregiver live or rent out a property. If a bill that enables those passes in a community and no new accessory dwelling units are built because the permitting process is too difficult or people are not aware of it, did we actually change anybody's lives or help people there? So we've been very focused on, after that passage, what are the tools that AARP needs to build or do to help communities then raise awareness or then make that permitting process a little bit more clear? And we've actually been looking at this. There's about 70 communities across the country where AARP state offices are really focusing their livable communities work. That doesn't mean we don't do work in more places, but there's a really intentional focus. And we've looked across those. There have been over 350 real tangible things that have been done as a result of AARP's efforts in those communities, with another 600 in progress. So we're looking at those to better understand what are the resources we're developing that are helping to lead to those, what are the tactics that AARP state offices are using to help lead to those. So really achieving results is at the center of everything that we do. And I'd love to kick it over toRebecca here, because I think she's got some great examples as well,
your point.
particularly speaking about the community challenge.
After Rebecca speaks, Myrtle, I do want to hear your opinion as far as results in the state of Georgia.
Okay.
Sure. Well, that was a great setup. And I think really, the reality is that the thing that makes it possible for AARP to drive these sort of results is our state offices. You know, when I go back, this is a really unique differentiator for our organization, that we have staff and volunteers on the ground in all 50 states, plus Washington, D.C., Puerto Rico, U.S. Virgin Islands.
Yes.
That's really what enables us to drive those sort of results. And we're tracking them, as Mike said, in our work around the country. We're tracking them in terms of those 800 plus age-friendly communities. We're tracking them in terms of those 1,300 community challenge grants and looking at how many are able to go on and secure additional funding, are
Right.
able to go and overcome barriers, whether they're policy barriers or otherwise, and are able to turn some of these temporary improvements into more permanent change in their communities. And we've been seeing really tremendous results through that. I guess I'll just close in terms of my part. And the reality is that there's a real imperative for this work. We're grounded, all of our work on livable communities is driven by our understanding that our country is changing, that by 2034, we'll be comprised more of older adults and of children for the very first time in the United States. And that's something that drives us every day. So I think that to the extent that livable communities is a framework that local leaders resonate with, and also that we can all see ourselves in, whether it's ourselves, whether it's an aging parent, whether it's a neighbor or another loved one, that we're able to sort of leverage that in order to achieve those results and ensure that communities are really taking that forward-looking approach, looking at how to leverage this incredible asset in terms of their populations and how they use that to in turn drive more change on the ground and more communities that are going to benefit people of all ages. I'd love to pass it over to Myrtle for her thoughts in terms of results in Georgia as well.
Yeah, before you turn it over to Myrtle, I like what you said about the population. The older population is slowly getting larger than the younger population. So we will have to keep that in mind as we continue with our livable communities. Yes, Myrtle.
Okay, well, I totally agree with the outcomes that Rebecca and Mike mentioned. We are seeing results in Georgia. Some are small, some are larger.
Sure.
But I think one of the things, a couple of comments I want to make. Some of the things is that the livable community age-friendly programs serve as organizing programs for many of our communities. We're large, we're 10 million plus people in Georgia, but we've got 159 counties.
Wow.
And many of those, after you get outside of metro, they are rural. And so what we've seen with working through our 12 regions is that coming together, that common bond. So whether you're talking about us, and I'll mention just 3 different instances that go together, I think that support what we're talking about. Whether you're talking about a small community like Madison, Georgia, which is up near Athens of less than 5,000 people, or you're talking about a city like Macon with almost 200,000 people, or you're talking about a region like the Southwest region, which is down south going toward Florida, that's got over about 430,000 people. You see a commonality. They're all interested in housing. They're interested in transportation, affordable, accessible. They're interested in broadband and Wi-Fi and communications and telehealth. So that's that commonality that the program involves. So what do we see as our volunteers are sharing information about livable community, the toolkits and best practices? You see communities, and I'm working with our volunteers and stakeholders actually implementing. So in Madison, Georgia, there are all kinds of successes about community gardens and building up the city structure and looking at and using the walking toolkit. When you get to Macon, Georgia, you see more about pedestrian safety and bike walks and communities and restoring them. And then with our Southwest region, we are so excited about them because they've got 14 counties, again, over 400,000 people. This is our 3rd webinar statewide we have done with them on pedestrian street safety, on transportation, on how, and now we're doing home fit programs and summits with them. And they pass on their information to the other 11 regions. So there are successes all over. Wonderful. And again, going back to the volunteers and the community, something that Rebecca and Mike both said, each community, they have overlapping needs, but how they prioritize them and how they go about it, they decide that. But where we come in is to help them to make that happen, to share best practices, to use our toolkit. So obviously in Georgia, we love Livable Age Friendly. We love the staff, and really all of our leaders throughout these regions are embracing it and applauding. We have contacts all over now that we didn't previously have with some of these communities. And so again, the tool that's brought it together is Livable Age Friendly Community.
Wonderful. Wow. Well, Myrtle, I'm sure that your success stories can be duplicated throughout some of the other states in the United States. So out of our 53 states that we represent with AARP, or 52 plus Puerto Rico. But anyway, we thank you all for sharing all of this. Now, as we bring closure to this podcast, I always like to just say thank you. But is there anything else that you wanted to share about Livable Communities, Age Friendly Network, Challenge Grants, any of those topics that you thought about after our conversation? So please go ahead. If there's something else you'd like to share, please go ahead and do so as we begin to bring closure.
I'm happy to jump in really quick with just to kind of, again, thank you for having the three of us on to talk about this topic, and a huge thank you to the AARP volunteers across the country who make this work possible, and in many places are driving it, are coming up with new ideas.
Yes.
When I think about our Livable Communities work, it truly started from AARP state office volunteers wanting to go out and respond to local challenges that they were seeing, their friends were seeing, their neighbors were seeing, at least from my understanding, particularly in the pedestrian safety space. Rebecca talked a little bit about the AARP Walk Audit Toolkit. That came about because AARP state office volunteers were wanting to go out and fix some problematic and unsafe intersections in their community. So it truly is an initiative that is from AARP volunteers and works well because of AARP volunteers. And the last thing I would say is, if you do want to stay up to date on all of the things coming out of the AARP world on Livable Communities, there's a lot of internal, external channels, but the one that I would suggest that you be a part of is the AARP free weekly Livable Communities newsletter. You can kind of download to subscribe to that for free with a very narrow kind of opt-in for it. It's aarp.org/livable. There's tons of resources on that website you'll be able to find, and you'll be able there to find the link to subscribe to that free weekly newsletter, which will get in your inbox weekly, give you all the new resources, all the new tools, and share information about what's happening around the country. So thank you again to all of you.
Thank you.
Would love to turn it over. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I will say if Myrtle or Rebecca, if you have any closing comments.
Sure, I'll pile on and say thank you to the thousands of volunteers around the country that are engaging with us on this work. We could not do it without you. This is really, again, the heart and blood of the work we do. It's what it enables us to engage on Livable Communities work in an incredibly authentic way by virtue of having people that live in communities that care about their communities, that are committed to making them better places. So thank you to all of our viewers, our listeners who are a part of this work. And don't be shy, reach out. As Mike said, this work started because of volunteers that wanted to make their communities better. That's still very much a part of how we do our work. So if you're seeing something and say, well, I've noticed this, it'd be great if I had a little more resource or understanding or tools on how to address this particular issue. We love hearing from volunteers and staff that are engaged in those ways. So reach out to us, let us know what you're seeing, let us know the sort of results that you're finding from the work and how we can continue to help. Because we want to be there alongside you in this work every step of the way.
Wonderful.
Again, I'll just say thanks also, Lillian, for hosting this program and selecting this topic. Again, as you said, and each of us has said, is that it takes teamwork. And one of the reasons that people throughout the country are so dedicated is the communities, is where we live. And we want to enhance it and do what we can. And I think AARP is a true partner that help us to provide the tools, the best practices, and ways to help do that. So again, thanks for all the great staff, the national office, and all of the wonderful volunteers throughout who are committed every day to helping to make this a better country, better community, and to do what we can to help people age with dignity
Yes.
and just have the best life that we can have.
Great. Well, again, thank you, Rebecca, Myrtle, and Mike. It has been a pleasure. What a lot of information, a lot of valuable information on livable communities. So to our staff and volunteers who are listening to this podcast, we ask you to subscribe to the Roost News Podcast. You may also listen on your favorite audio platform. And so until next time, we say thank you. And thank you for listening to the Roost News Podcast. We'll see you later. Bye-bye.